Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Sawyer, with his gray hair and time-worn gaze, stared out the airplane window as the clouds gradually gave way, revealing the small town he had abandoned 25 years ago. Each bend in the river, every distant hill, brought back memories he had tried, and failed, to bury over the decades. Coming back to a place he had sworn never to see again felt strangely uncomfortable, like running into an old friend who was now a stranger. He clutched the handle of his leather briefcase nervously, the same briefcase carrying the documents needed to settle the inheritance left by his Uncle George. George had always been the father figure Sawyer never had, a man with simple values and straightforward advice. His uncle's death was one more loss in a life full of them, but it was also the reason Sawyer had to confront the past he'd worked so hard to avoid. He wondered if there was more to the property George had left him, maybe a message, a final gesture to help him make sense of his own choices. But as the plane drew closer to the runway, his uncle's death wasn't what filled Sawyer's thoughts. It was Larissa. He could see her clearly in his mind, as though it were yesterday, that captivating smile that won him over in their youth, and those eyes that seemed to promise a future full of love and companionship. At the same time, he felt the crushing weight of betrayal. The memory surfaced with the painful precision of a knife twisting in an old wound, coming home after weeks away, exhausted but excited to finally tell his wife how his sacrifice would bring them more comfort and stability. He found her on the couch, only she wasn't alone. The boss who had convinced him to accept an out-of-town assignment was there, and there was no doubt about what was happening. Sawyer blinked quickly, trying to block out the flashback. But the pain from that day was still as raw as when he learned Larissa was pregnant, and not by him. It broke something inside him in a way that no other hardship ever had. He not only left Larissa but everything else behind, the house, his friends, the town. He became a shadow of the man he once was, rebuilding his life from emotional wreckage somewhere far away. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, snapping Sawyer back to the present. He took a deep breath and, for a moment, considered staying in his seat. Maybe it would be better to return to his new life and forget this chapter ever existed. But he knew that was impossible. Some stories have to be faced, no matter how painful. He looked out the window again, catching sight of the small, familiar airport. With a sigh, he decided it was time to get off. Sawyer rolled his luggage along the terminal, his shoes sounding softly against the cold floor as he took in the steady flow of people around him. Some were in a hurry, others wandered without a care. He felt somewhere in between, anxious to face whatever awaited him, yet in no rush to get there. He headed to the gate for his connecting flight, where he noticed a young woman sitting alone. She had brown hair in a messy bun, sunglasses resting on her head, and a slightly impatient expression while scrolling through her phone. Something about her posture drew his attention, a blend of self-assurance and restlessness that seemed oddly familiar. When he settled into the seat beside her, she glanced up briefly and offered a polite smile. He acknowledged her with a slight nod and looked away, but he couldn't help noticing that she seemed much more at ease than he felt in that moment. A few minutes later, the loudspeaker announced boarding, and by coincidence, they ended up next to each other on the plane. The aircraft had barely left the ground when the young woman broke the silence. "Do you hate long layovers too?" she asked in a casual tone, although her eyes hinted at genuine curiosity. Sawyer let out a quiet laugh, something he hadn't done in years. "I'd say I'm not a fan. Especially when there isn't a strong reason to travel in the first place." She tilted her head, studying him for a moment before responding. "No one travels without a reason, even if they think they don't have one." He raised his eyebrows, surprised by the unexpected insight. "You might be right." Their conversation flowed easily, as though they were old friends. She introduced herself as Rowan, 25, with a vibrant energy that stood in stark contrast to Sawyer's weary look. She'd spent a week visiting friends in a nearby town and was on her way back home. Though she didn't go into much detail, she mentioned a complicated relationship with her family. Her relaxed way of speaking concealed something deeper, and while Sawyer picked up on it, he decided not to press her. He felt an urge to share a little about his own life, something he rarely did. "I'm heading back to take care of something I walked away from a long time ago. I recently lost someone important, and it's forcing me to face certain things." Rowan nodded understandingly, then shifted the subject, maybe to keep the conversation from getting too heavy. "You know, when I travel, I like to imagine stories about everyone around me. You come across as someone who's been through a lot but still has plenty left to discover." "Is that a compliment?" he asked, smiling for the first time since boarding. "Maybe. Or a bit of a challenge," she answered, her eyes sparkling with humor. Their conversation began to get more personal. Rowan talked about her childhood, shaped by the lack of a stable father figure. She mentioned her mom, a strong-willed woman who always seemed to be hiding something. "My mom is a mystery," Rowan admitted, looking out the window. "I've always felt like she's carrying secrets she doesn't want to talk about. And my stepdad, he's polite, but I never felt like he was really interested in being a part of our family." Sawyer felt a pang in his chest, but he wasn't sure why. Her words struck an odd chord in him, as though they were brushing up against things he had buried long ago. Still, he kept listening, his curiosity growing. As the plane began its descent, Rowan turned to him and said with a smile, "Sometimes I think we meet the right people in the most unlikely places." He just nodded, unable to find a suitable response. As the plane touched down, Sawyer realized that this brief meeting had stirred something in him in a way he never expected. Rowan was a mystery. She carried her own scars with a kind of lightness that made him wonder if he could ever feel that way again. And in that moment, as the plane taxied down the runway, Sawyer began to suspect that this encounter might hold more meaning than he could grasp just yet. Something deep inside him, long dormant, felt as though it was starting to wake up. The airport was as busy as ever, but to Sawyer, it felt almost suffocating, like every sound was louder than necessary. He and Rowan left the plane side by side. Normally, each would go their separate way, but there was an effortless rapport between them that made the idea of parting feel strange. Apparently, Rowan felt the same. "So, what's next for you?" she asked, adjusting her backpack strap while they walked. Sawyer hesitated. He knew he had important business to attend to, but the words wouldn't come. "I have a few things to settle in town." "You?" "Surprise," she said, smiling mischievously. "I decided to drop in on my mom without warning. I'm sure she'll be shocked. We haven't seen each other in a while." There was a hint of vulnerability in her voice that made Rowan seem less confident than she appeared. Sawyer noticed but said nothing. It was intriguing how open she seemed, even as she withheld the heavier details. And it felt natural, which only drew him in more. When they reached the airport exit, Rowan looked around, as if trying to decide what to do next. "Do you have any plans tonight? I mean, if it's not urgent, maybe we could grab dinner or something. We did share a flight, after all, it'd be nice to keep talking." The invitation caught him off guard but in a pleasant way. There was a genuine warmth in her suggestion, a desire to continue this shared moment. For a second, Sawyer wanted to accept without hesitation. Maybe it was the emotional weight of his trip, or the strange familiarity he felt around Rowan, but he found himself nodding. "Sure, why not?" he said with a small smile. "I can put off what I need to do until tomorrow." Rowan lit up. "Great. I know a perfect spot near the hotel where I'm staying. You'll love it." Night fell quickly, and the place she suggested was small, cozy, and away from downtown's bustle. The decor was simple, but every detail seemed carefully chosen, from the gentle lighting to the hint of fresh herbs in the air. They took a table by the window, and long before they even ordered, they slipped back into easy conversation. Rowan shared stories from her youth, full of discovery and challenges, especially those tied to her rocky relationship with her mother. "She's always been tough to please. I think she wanted more from me but never spelled it out. It felt like I was supposed to read her mind. Sawyer listened closely, each of her words stirring something in him. He understood all too well what it felt like to live with unspoken expectations. He'd been through that in his own marriage. Yet, as he listened, he had the sense that Rowan was unaware of a deeper piece to her story, one that even she didn't fully know. "And your stepdad?" he asked carefully. "How do you get along with him?" Rowan shrugged, fiddling with her napkin. "Richard is formal, I guess. He does the bare minimum, plays his role, but you can tell he's only doing it because he has to. Like there's no real desire to be part of our family." The name hit Sawyer like a punch to the gut. He paused but managed to mask his reaction. Richard. Could it be just a coincidence? It was a common enough name, he told himself, though it set his heart racing. "And you?" she asked, leaning in as though challenging him to open up. "You seem like you're carrying a lot too." He nodded. "I am. But some things just take time before you can talk about them." She gave a soft laugh that felt warm and genuine. "Fair enough. But I bet I can get something out of you by the end of the night." Dinner arrived, and they kept chatting between bites, swapping stories and jokes. Even though Sawyer tried to focus on the easy parts of their talk, the name Richard kept echoing in his mind. He wanted to convince himself he was overreacting, but experience, or maybe his gut, told him otherwise. When they were done eating, Rowan suggested he walk her back to her hotel. "You've been the best company I've had in months," she teased. "And since you have nothing else going on tonight, you can help carry my bags to my room." Sawyer laughed and agreed. They walked through the calm streets together, and Sawyer felt torn. On one hand, he was enjoying this connection, rare as it was for him. On the other, there was a growing uneasiness, like destiny was at work in ways he couldn't yet understand. They reached the hotel, and Rowan asked him to come up. "Nothing funny," she said, sensing his hesitation. "I just like some company. It's nice talking to someone who seems to get it." Sawyer agreed. Climbing those stairs felt strangely significant, like crossing an invisible line that would change everything. He couldn't explain why he felt that way, but the feeling was undeniable. Despite not knowing what lay ahead, he went with her. Sawyer woke to the first rays of sunlight in Rowan's hotel room. He was on the chair beside her bed, covered by a sheet she'd tossed over him. They'd stayed up talking for hours, sharing painful memories and lighter, laughter-filled moments until tiredness overcame them. Now, he gazed at Rowan, still asleep, feeling a mixture of admiration and confusion. Their connection ran deep, almost inexplicably so, but something in the back of his mind whispered there was more to all this than he realized. Rowan's phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the quiet. She opened her eyes slowly, squinting at the light, and answered without sitting up. "Oh, perfect, it's my mom," she muttered, sounding both relieved and nervous. "She wants to meet for breakfast downstairs. Want to come along?" Sawyer hesitated. The thought of meeting strangers this early was exhausting. Still, he didn't want to turn her down. "Sure," he said, standing up to stretch his aching muscles. They headed downstairs and found Larissa already at a corner table in the hotel restaurant, focused on her phone. When she looked up to greet her daughter, her smile instantly vanished at the sight of Sawyer. He froze too. Seeing Larissa again, so changed from the last time, made his heart pound. She looked older, but she still had that polished, in-control air she'd always had. "You okay, Mom?" Rowan asked, glancing between her and Sawyer, clearly unaware of the tension. Larissa blinked, regaining her composure. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm fine. Who's your friend?" "This is Sawyer," Rowan answered happily, with no inkling of what was about to unfold. "We met on the flight. He's great, Mom, you should hear his stories." Sawyer felt Larissa's stare, part shock and part fear, as though she were trying to figure out whether he had come back for revenge or by chance. In that moment, he realized this wasn't coincidence. Rowan was Larissa's daughter, the child she was carrying when he discovered the betrayal that shattered his life. And now, without realizing it, he found himself right in the middle of it all. "Nice to meet you, Larissa," he said politely, though the words carried far more weight than Rowan could have guessed. He saw Larissa's eyes narrow, as if trying to decode his purpose. Rowan glanced at each of them in turn, suspicious. "Have you two met before?" A heavy silence settled over the table. Larissa forced a smile. "Maybe by sight, small town, you know." Sawyer sat down, still trying to absorb the torrent of emotions rushing through him. Anger, shock, and a strange kind of relief. For years, he'd wondered about a moment like this, but he'd never imagined it would happen under these circumstances. Still, now that he was face to face with Larissa, he felt he had things to say, not to hurt her, but to be free of the ghosts that had haunted him all this time. Funny how life goes around, isn't it? He fixed his gaze on Larissa. "I never dreamed I'd run into you like this, Larissa. And with a daughter as amazing as Rowan." Larissa blushed, looking away, while Rowan grew even more confused. "What's going on here?" she asked, sounding serious. Sawyer drew in a steadying breath. He didn't want to blurt everything out, but there was no going back. He had to tell the truth, no matter the fallout for Rowan. "Rowan," he began, trying to choose his words carefully, "I think you deserve to know something about your mother, and me." Larissa raised a hand to stop him. "Sawyer, not here. Not like this." He shook his head. "She needs to hear it." Now fully alert, Rowan locked eyes with them both, demanding answers. "What's happening? Would someone please explain?" Sawyer's chest felt tight, but he knew he had to continue. "Years ago, I was married to your mother, Larissa. We had a life together, but it all fell apart when I found out she'd cheated on me. The worst part was discovering she was pregnant, only not by me." His words hung in the air like a looming storm. Rowan turned pale, her eyes wide. "Wait, you're saying..." Before she could finish, Larissa touched her arm. "Rowan, please, let's talk about this in private." But Rowan pulled away, tears welling in her eyes. "No. I want to hear the truth. All of it." Sawyer felt the full weight of the situation. This was no longer just about him and Larissa, this was about Rowan, a young woman who'd unknowingly grown up in the aftermath of an old, painful secret. He closed his eyes for a moment, bracing for what would come next. To Rowan, the bustle and noise of the restaurant vanished, leaving only Sawyer's words echoing in her ears. She looked at him and at her mother, searching for answers in faces that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Larissa avoided her gaze, while Sawyer watched her with a mix of sadness and resolve. You were married to my mom?" Rowan asked, her voice trembling between disbelief and confusion. "And she was pregnant, with my dad?" Sawyer held her gaze. He wouldn't hide anymore. "Yes, Rowan. I found out just before I left town. It was one of the hardest things I've ever faced. For years, I tried to block it out. But life has a cruel way of forcing us to confront our past." Larissa's voice shook with guilt and a trace of her old authority as she finally spoke. "Rowan, please, don't jump to conclusions. I did what I believed was right at the time." "Right?" Rowan snapped, raising her voice. "You cheated on your husband and brought me into this mess. And you never told me a thing. You never even mentioned who you really were, or what happened before I was born." Rowan's words landed with crushing force. Larissa drew in a long breath, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. "I made choices, very difficult ones. Back then, it was so complicated, Rowan." Complicated for you?" Rowan cut in. "What about him? She glanced at Sawyer, who sat there, seeming sympathetic yet resigned to this outburst. Sawyer decided it was time to speak. "Rowan, I didn't share all this to hurt you. I had no clue who you were until yesterday. None of this is on you." "I know," she said through tears, "but can you even imagine how it feels to grow up in a house that always felt off? I sensed something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Now it's clear, I was the product of an affair, of a lie you both chose to keep hidden for years." Larissa reached out, but Rowan pulled away, standing abruptly. "No, Mom. Don't try to defend yourself now. I just need some space to figure this out." Without waiting for a reply, she hurried out of the restaurant, her hurried footsteps echoing behind her. Sawyer and Larissa remained in a stunned silence, grappling with what had just happened. "Why would you do that?" Larissa whispered at last, her voice full of pain. "Why drop everything on her like that? Do you have any idea what that will do to her?" Sawyer met her gaze. His tone was steady but not without sympathy. "She deserved to know the truth. You built your life on secrets and half-truths. Maybe that was easier for you, but it was never fair to her. And in some ways, it wasn't fair to me either." Larissa wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. She knew he was right, and admitting that felt overwhelming. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "I just didn't know what else to do." Sawyer let out a heavy breath, both relieved and sad. "What are you going to do now, Larissa? How do you plan to fix this?" She stayed quiet, looking at the chair where Rowan had been sitting moments before. It was like she hoped her daughter might suddenly reappear and rewind everything, undoing the damage that had just been revealed. Sawyer got up, sensing he had no reason to remain there. "I'm going after her," he said calmly. "Because regardless of what happened between us, she deserves better than this." Larissa didn't reply, only watched him leave through the same door Rowan had used. She felt small and overwhelmed by the weight of her own decisions. The truth she had avoided for so long was now staring her in the face, and she knew she couldn't keep running. Outside, Sawyer found Rowan on a nearby bench, her face in her hands as she tried to keep her tears at bay. He approached quietly so as not to startle her. "Rowan," he said softly. She looked up, eyes red but determined. "Did you know?" "No," he answered immediately. "I had no idea. If I'd known, I would have done my best to prevent all this. But now that I know, I can't pretend otherwise." Rowan inhaled shakily. "I don't even know what to do with all this, Sawyer. My mom lied to me for my entire life. And you're part of a past I knew nothing about." He nodded, sitting beside her. "I understand. I'm not expecting you to trust me or make sense of all this right away. But I'm here if you need answers, or just a friendly ear." She studied his face for a long moment, as though deciding whether to believe him. Finally, she exhaled. "I just need time." Sawyer nodded, giving her the space she needed. They sat in uncomfortable but honest silence, the first step along a road neither knew how to navigate. Rowan spent the rest of the day wandering through the city streets, trying to absorb the avalanche of information she'd received. Every corner brought echoes of a past that wasn't technically hers but still defined her. Words from Sawyer and Larissa echoed in her head: betrayal, lies, secrets. Stopping at a small park, she sat on a bench under a tree, feeling like a stranger in her own life. By sunset, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Sawyer: "If you're up for talking, I'm at the restaurant next to the hotel. Your call. Not here to pressure you, but I'm here." She stared at it for a while, unsure how to respond or what to expect. But she knew she couldn't leave everything hanging like this. She had questions, gaps in her own story that needed answers, and Sawyer might be the only person willing to fill them in. Rowan arrived at the restaurant about half an hour later. Sawyer sat near the window, leaning over an open notebook, scribbling something. He snapped it shut when he saw her and stood, relief evident on his face. "Thanks for coming," he said, offering a subdued but genuine smile. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me." "I almost didn't," she admitted, taking a seat. "But I need to understand all this, and you seem to be the only one who'll tell me the truth." Sawyer nodded, aware of the weight of that responsibility. He waved over the waiter, ordering a coffee for her and tea for himself. Once the waiter left, he began to speak. "You know, Rowan, I spent the past 25 years trying to erase that part of my life, not because I was a coward, but because I thought it was the only way to move on. What happened between your mom and me was devastating, but what hurt the most was losing the future I had imagined for us. I threw myself into my work, moved away, and never looked back. Until now." She listened intently, letting him continue. He could tell she was battling a storm of emotions beneath her calm demeanor. "When I met you on the plane, I had no clue who you were," he said. "I saw a smart young woman full of energy, and you brightened my day in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. So when I found out you were Larissa's daughter, it felt like the ground disappeared under my feet." "And now?" Rowan asked, finally speaking up. "What do you want from me?" "From all this?" The question startled him, but he kept his composure. "Rowan, I'm not here to make your life any harder. If anything, I want you to know that, despite everything, I don't hold any grudges, certainly not against you, and I'm not even sure I do against your mom anymore. I've realized that my anger was directed more at time and circumstances than at any person. We can't rewrite history, but maybe we can decide where things go from here." She stayed quiet a moment, stirring her coffee. "And my mother, do you think she feels the same?" Sawyer sighed. "Larissa is complicated. She always has been. But I believe she loves you, even if she's made mistakes. Maybe it's time for you two to talk openly, with no more secrets." "That sounds way too easy," Rowan said with a hint of a bitter smile. "But she's my mom, and after this, I'm not sure if I can trust her again." He nodded gently. "Trusting someone who's hurt you takes time. But sometimes, offering a second chance is more about you finding peace than about them proving something." She took in his words. She still didn't know if she was ready to forgive, but something in Sawyer's sincerity was breaking through her walls in a way she couldn't deny. "So, what do you think I should do now?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. "I think you should do what feels right for you," he answered. "But if there's even a small chance you can make peace with your mother, it might be worth trying. We don't always get the chance to tie up loose ends." Rowan responded with a faint smile, like she recognized the truth in what he was saying but wasn't fully ready to take that step. "You're good at advice." "It's always easier to give advice than to follow it," he said with a gentle laugh. They chatted a while longer, alternating between serious talk and lighter moments. By the time they got up to leave, Rowan felt a bit lighter herself, as though the intense weight of the day had lessened. She knew there was still a lot to figure out, but for the first time, she sensed she wasn't alone in it. Sawyer walked her back to the hotel. Before heading inside, she looked at him with an expression mixing gratitude and uncertainty. "Thanks, Sawyer. For everything. I don't know where this is headed, but, thanks for being here." "I'll be here whenever you need me," he said sincerely. As she passed through the hotel doors, Sawyer remained on the sidewalk, eyes on the city lights. He knew there was still a long road ahead, both for him and for Rowan. But for the first time in many years, he felt that this was a path worth following. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.